This program is brought to you by Humanities Nebraska, a statewide nonprofit organization cultivating an understanding of our history and culture with additional funding from Nebraska Cultural Endowment. If you enjoy this type of programming, please consider supporting Humanities Nebraska with a contribution. Donations are matched by state and federal funds. Your support helps preserve our past and inform our future. Today we have Bill Lepp with us. Bill Lepp is an internationally known storyteller and humorist whose style has been described as a satisfying blend of Bill Cosby and Jeff Foxworthy. A 5-time champion of the West Virginia Liars Contest, his outrageous tall tales and witty stories have earned the appreciation of listeners of all ages and from all walks of life. Lepp explains that while his stories may not be completely true, they are always honest. He is an award-winning author and recording artist and has been featured at venues across the nation. Lepp is the recipient of the Storytelling Circle of Excellence Award. Please welcome Bill Lepp.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. No, them. Who are you guys? What? Halding and Halsey and Spalding. Hello, Halsey. Are they hearing me?
They got their mic. You can go ahead and unmute your mic there at Halsey.
All right. Well, we waved at him. We'll talk to him later. Look at me. Don't look at that. All right. I'm going to tell you guys a story, and I may want you to participate. But what's really important is that when I no longer wish you to participate, that you then cease participating. Which means when I want you to quit, I want you to quit. So the first thing we're going to do is I want you guys to go like this. When I tell you to, I want you to go, hello. Not loud, just go, hello. You don't have to do the hand thing, just go, hello. And then when I go like this, you quit. All right, ready? Ready? Go. Excellent. All right. Now let me ask you a question. Just raise your hand if you have a teacher. Hey, most of you. Okay, put your hands down. How many of you just raise your hand if you think your teacher is the greatest teacher ever? And I don't even think they're looking, so you don't even have to lie. All right, good. Put your hands down. Well, when I was in the 4th grade, I went to a school called Half Dollar Elementary School. And my 4th grade teacher was a woman named Mrs. Baird. And no offense to any teachers in the audience, but Mrs. Baird was the single greatest teacher that ever lived. And this is why. Our entire 4th grade year, she never once yelled at us, she never raised her voice, she never screamed. Instead, what she did was the very first day of school, she came into the classroom. We had 2 chalkboards in our classroom, 2 big green chalkboards, one way at the front of the classroom and one in the back of the classroom. And the very first day of school, Mrs. Baird came into the classroom. She went to that back chalkboard. She took a piece of yellow chalk and she wrote each student's name on the chalkboard. And if you ever did anything wrong, she wouldn't holler at you. She'd just walk to the back of the classroom, pick up a piece of purple chalk, and make a mark beside your name. And if you could go all week and get 3 or fewer marks beside your name, you got a lollipop at the end of the week. And we worked hard for those lollipops. I can tell you that my entire 4th grade career, I got 4 lollipops. And one of those, I was sick 3 days that week. But even though we loved Mrs. Baird so much, we had one problem with her, one nagging suspicion, and this is what it was. When I was in the 4th grade, there was a television show called Wonder Woman. It was a live-action show with real actors and actresses, and the lady who played Wonder Woman was an actress named Linda Carter. And my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Baird, looked exactly like Linda Carter. And we were not as sophisticated as fourth graders are today. So we thought if our teacher looked like Linda Carter, and Linda Carter played Wonder Woman on television, we jumped to the logical conclusion that our teacher was Wonder Woman. And we decided it was our responsibility to force her to reveal herself as Wonder Woman. Now, we knew we couldn't just go up and ask her, right? We couldn't just walk up and be like, excuse me, Mrs. Baird, are you Wonder Woman? Because if she was a superhero, she'd have been too smart for that. She'd have said no. So we knew we were going to have to come up with a plan. So every day we'd go in the lunchroom and we'd have these really deep, intellectual, philosophical, fourth grade arguments. Because everybody thought she was Wonder Woman except Alicia Snitch. And I would say something like, I propose the theory that Mrs. Baird is in fact Wonder Woman. And then Alicia would say something really intelligent back. She'd be like, to which I would naturally reply, oh-ho. And these conversations would go on forever. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to divide the room right down the middle. Divide yourselves at Spalding and Hayes. Halsey. Divide yourselves at Spalding and Halsey right down the middle. And in a minute, we'll switch. So don't get upset with me. But right down the middle, you guys on this side, you're Alicia. I said don't get upset. So you guys got to go like this. When I point at you, you guys go like this. Do it again. That's pretty good. You guys over here, you guys are me. You guys go like this. Oh-ho. Okay, except I don't sound that smart. You got to kind of bring it down. You got to be like, oh-ho. Excellent. All right. So I said, I think Mrs. Baird is Wonder Woman. And Alicia said. And I said. Excellent. Excellent. So these arguments would go on for the whole lunch period. We were having an argument one day when my buddy Wally came running in. Now, Wally was the brains of the operation. Wally was sort of the Phineas and the Ferb of Half Dollar Elementary School. But he was one of these kids that's always going 100 miles an hour. Can't sit still, couldn't even sit down. The kid was just always going. Nowadays, they give you something for that. Back then, we just let kids go. And Wally came running and I got it, I know it, I figured it out. I said, lay it on me. He said, I know how Mrs. Baird is Wonder Woman. I said, let me have it. He said, think about it. He said, the President of the United States of America, who knows who the president was in 1978? Less enthusiastic. Yes? Ooh, no. Yes? Oh, okay. Yes?
Kennedy.
Ooh, no.
Ronald Reagan.
Ooh, very close. One off. Say Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter, right. Wally said, the President of the United States of America is Jimmy Carter. And I said, uh-huh. And he said, Linda Carter is Wonder Woman. And I said, uh-huh. And he said, they have the same last name. They must be related. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe Wonder Woman is the president's mother. And my buddy Skeeter said, no, maybe it's his daughter. And Wally said, no, maybe it's his wife. He said, think about it. If you were the president of the United States of America and your wife was a superhero, we wouldn't need an army. If there was trouble in South America or the Middle East, you could just send your wife to take care of it. And my buddy Skeeter, who had grown up in a predominantly Republican household, said, so that's how Jimmy Carter got elected president. But Alicia said, you don't get that. Alicia said, why would the wife of the president of the United States of America be teaching fourth grade at Half Dollar Elementary School? And I said, maybe to protect her identity. And Skeeter said, maybe there's some evil afoot. And Wally said, maybe the third graders are an alien army. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We turned around to look at a third grade lunch table, and about half the boys were back there. They were making baboon arms like this. They had carrots up their noses. And we were like, yeah. So we decided what we were going to have to do is one of us was going to have to put ourselves in great peril. If one of us was about to die, Mrs. Baird would be forced to reveal herself as Wonder Woman to come and save us. So we went out on the playground, and my buddy Skeeter volunteered. He walked over to the monkey bars, and he climbed up on the monkey bars, and then he climbed about halfway across, and then he let go with one arm. So there he was, hanging, I don't know, maybe, maybe 18 inches off the ground. If he had fallen from that height, he could have twisted his ankle or skinned his knee, mortal peril. And we all started yelling, help, help, help. Ready? Do that with me, ready? Help, help, help. You people at the remote schools. Keep going, remote school people, go. Excellent, now stop doing it. Now, stop. And so we were screaming, and Mrs. Baird had turned around to talk to another teacher. Now, you guys don't believe this, but outside of caring for you people, teachers do have lives outside of this school, and they have other interests. And she had turned around to discuss something with another teacher. But when she heard us yelling, well, on the TV show, Wonder Woman did not dress like Wonder Woman all day long. She had a secret identity, like Peter Parker as Spider-Man or Bruce Wayne as Batman. She was Diana Prince, mild-mannered ambassador for the United States of America, which is how we figured she and the president had met in the first place. But so during non-crisis times, she just wore normal ambassador clothing. She'd have on like a skirt and a blouse. And when she needed to become Wonder Woman, what she would do, this was very high-tech stuff, what she would do is she would throw her arms out like this, and then she would spin around in circles. Like that, only real fast. And then there'd be a bright light, and then her ambassador clothing would be gone. And she'd be standing there in that, well, you know Wonder Woman wears, right? Or did until recently. It's like, what it looks like to me is like a bathing suit, okay? It's like a modest one-piece red, white, and blue patriotic bathing suit with a big golden WW right here, and then calf-high boots, a rope, and a tiara, a crown like Miss America wears. It did not seem like very practical crime-fighting wear to me, but you know, what do I know? So anyway, we started yelling. Ready? Help! 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 And Mrs. Stop it! I'm watching you. And Mrs. Baird, who had turned around to talk to another teacher, went like this. And we all went, ooh. And then she started to spin around like this. And we were all like, ah. And she got about this far around, and she looked, and she saw Skeeter, and she said, well, Lordy, Skeeter, just let go. We were that close. She had spun just a few more degrees, there'd have been the bright light, she'd have turned into Wonder Woman. So now we had to come up with another plan. So we were back in the lunchroom, and this time, you guys are Alicia, and you guys are me, and you guys switch your way. And so I said, I think Mrs. Baird is Wonder Woman, and Alicia said, and I said, and Wally came running in. I got it, I know it, I figured it out. I said, lay it on me. He said, think about it. He said, Metropolis, that's the city where the DC superheroes hang out. He said, Metropolis is a long way from $50 West Virginia. I said, uh-huh. He said Wonder Woman might need to be able to get there at a moment's notice to save the world. I said, uh-huh. He said, so she can't just drive her car to school every day. She'd never be able to get to Metropolis quick enough in a crisis. I said, uh-huh. He said, therefore, she must come to school every day in her, what sort of vehicle does Wonder Woman operate? Yes, sir? An invisible jet. He said, therefore, she must come to school every day in her invisible jet. And if she comes to school in her invisible jet, she must park it in the teacher's parking lot. Well, it made sense to us. And we thought since the invisible jet was invisible, that it must be made out of really clean glass. So if you hit it with a pebble, it would go tink. And if you hit it with a large enough rock, what would happen? It would shatter. And so we thought if we could shatter the invisible jet, Mrs. Baird would be forced to assume that the Legion of Doom was rising up out of the woods. She'd spin around, turn into Wonder Woman, and come and save us. So the teacher's parking lot was right beside the playground. So every day during recess, we'd walk out to the edge of the playground. We'd be like, we'd whistle, because if you whistle, nobody knows you're up to anything. And when we got to the edge of the playground, just very nonchalantly, we'd go, and we'd pick up pebbles. And then very surreptitiously, we'd be, smooth. And we'd throw those pebbles into empty-looking spaces in the teacher's parking lot. We were out there one day, and Wally threw a pebble. And it bounced off the asphalt and went into the woods. And we heard tink, and Wally said, ooh. He said, I think I just hit Wonder Woman's jet with a rock. And Alicia Snitch said, I think you hit a bottle. And Skeeter said, what would a bottle be doing in the woods? And Alicia said, what would Wonder Woman's jet be doing in the woods? And Skeeter said, maybe she's hiding it there. And Alicia said, why would she need to hide an invisible jet? Well, while we were having this conversation over here, unbeknownst to us, Wally had found a rock about the size and shape of an English muffin. And he had cupped it in his hand and was getting ready to go into the discus throw. Now, no offense to all you fourth graders, but most of us know that there is not a fourth grader alive who can throw a discus in the direction he or she wants it to go. We knew this. We were self-actualized, but Wally was living in some sort of fantasy world. And we saw him just as he started to come around with that giant rock, and our world went to slow motion. We said, Wally! No! Ready? Do that with me. Wally! No! But it was too late. Wally let go of that giant rock, and it soared out over the teacher's parking lot higher and higher and higher. And Wally's momentum kept him spinning in circles. He lost his balance. He went somersaulting across the ground. And we watched as that rock reached the apex of its flight, hung suspended in midair for a split second, and then started to descend. It was like, it was whistling, so nobody would know what it was up to. Coming out of the sky faster and faster, gaining velocity as it fell, gaining mass as it gained velocity, coming down, 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 and then bam, it bounced off the hood of the principal's car. Ricocheted off the headlight of another car and smashed through the windshield of a school bus. And there was a great rending of metal and a cacophony of crashing glass, and all of the teachers started to run over to see what had happened. And just as the teachers arrived, Wally, who had been rolling across the ground and had heard everything but hadn't seen anything, naturally assumed that he had smashed Wonder Woman's jet with a rock. So just as the teachers arrived, Wally jumped up off the ground going, I did it! I did it! Well, the teachers just surrounded him. And they said, Wally, what are you doing? And he said, I was trying to hit. And then he thought about it. And he said, I was trying to hit Wonder Woman's jet with a rock. Well, fortunately, they had not yet invented the school psychologist. So we just went back to our classroom, and we sat down at our desks, and Mrs. Baird walked to the back of the classroom, picked up that piece of purple chalk, and made a mark beside Wally's name. And as she was walking back down the aisle, she stopped in front of Wally's desk, and she said, Wally, I am so disappointed in you. She said, don't you think that Wonder Woman would be smart enough to park her jet on the roof? And we were all like, oh, yeah, duh. Bet she didn't mean to give that away. But then it got to be October, and it was too cold to play outside anymore. This is back when we used to have something called winter. And it was a lot more difficult to put ourselves in peril inside. Now, I will tell you one thing. When I was a kid, when many of your teachers were children, in every gymnasium in America, hanging from the ceiling was a rope about that big around with a huge knot in the end. Came all the way down from the ceiling, 5 stories above the ground, all the way to the floor. And as part of our physical education, we were supposed to climb all the way up that rope, touch the ceiling of the gym, and then climb all the way back down. But hardly anyone was strong enough to climb all the way up there. Even fewer people were strong enough to climb all the way up there and then climb all the way back down. So what would happen is some kid would get all the way up there, and then one of two things would happen. They'd either sort of let go of the rope, and then they'd come down the rope at about 500 miles an hour, just and by the time they got to the bottom, they'd just be ashes because they would have just burned away. Or they let go of the rope entirely, and then they were like, And you'd think that when they hit the ground, that they go, right? But no, our teachers were concerned about our physical well-being, so they put a mat under the rope, and that mat was at least as thick as my shirt. So when you hit, you'd only break most of your bones, not all of them. But none of us were strong enough to climb that rope. So we kind of forgot about the whole Wonder Woman thing. Our interest started to flag. We started to think about other things. A kid in our classroom had a birthday, and his parents hired a clown, and the clown came in, and the clown brought a helium tank, and he blew up balloons for us. And then when he left, he forgot his helium tank for whatever reason. And in the back corner of our classroom, there were 2 lockers, 2 big doorless cabinets. They're about 8 feet tall, about 8 feet across. They sat perpendicular to each other, and the walls made sort of a cube in the back of the classroom with a little doorway. We'd come in the morning, we'd go back there, we'd put our lunch boxes and our jackets back there, and then anything we weren't using for the school year anymore got pushed behind those lockers. So like the Pinto, the Nina, and the Santa Maria were sitting behind those lockers. And then we took the helium tank, and we put it behind those lockers. And then we were studying the human respiratory system. Has anyone studied the human respiratory system yet? Does anyone know what organs are involved in the human respiratory system? Yes, ma'am? It is the throat, but where does it go? Yeah? The lungs, very good. And then there's something right here. Heart, very good. And then there's a muscle down here. Anybody know what this muscle's called? Yeah? It's under your rib cage, yeah. Oh, close. Yeah, in the blue. Yeah. Are you wearing blue? It's under the rib cage. It pushes up on your lungs. This is like education right here. What's happening? The diaphragm. Is that what you were about to say? Yeah, that's a good answer. So, put your hand in. We learned all about how when you inhale, the oxygen goes down your bronchus, which breaks into your bronchi, which breaks into smaller and smaller branches till it gets to the alveoli. The blood comes by. The carbon dioxide jumps out of your red blood cells into your alveoli. The oxygen jumps out of your alveoli into your red blood cells. You exhale, and that is how you breathe. It was fascinating to us. Most of you don't seem to care, but it was fascinating to us. And then it was almost Halloween. And on Halloween, all of the students, we were going to get to wear our costumes to school. And we were going to trick or treat from classroom to classroom. And we were going to have a contest. Who had the funniest costume? Who had the scariest costume? Who had the best overall costume? But again, this was the 1970s. So we weren't all going to win. Some of us were going home with our self-esteem in a shoebox. But that's just how we did things back then. And then at the end of the day, we were going to go in the auditorium, and the teachers were going to stand on stage. We'd never done this before. The teachers were going to stand on stage, and the teachers were going to have costumes on. And we students were going to get to judge which teacher had the best costume. And this blew us away, because we were kids. And kids know that teachers are adults, and that adults are not creative. So we thought, what are they going to come dressed as? Is like the gym teacher going to come dressed as the librarian? I mean, how exciting could this be? But better than all of that, our class was the best behaved class in the whole school. So our class was going to get to watch a scary movie in our classroom, no other students there. So the day arrived, 8:30. The bell rings. We're sitting in our desks. We had our costumes on. Doctors, nurses, football players, cheerleaders, scuba divers, astronauts, other non-gender specific costumes. 8:30, the bell rings. No Mrs. Baird. 8:35, no Mrs. Baird. 8:40, we were distraught. This was the single greatest day of our lives. We did not want to have a substitute teacher. Finally, at about 8:45, the classroom door opened up and Mrs. Baird came in. She was pushing a cart. And on top of the cart, there was a lump. And on top of the lump, there was a big piece of brown butcher paper. And she said, "Come here. I have a surprise for you guys." And we got up and we gathered around the cart. And she said, "You guys have done such a good job studying the human respiratory system that I have a surprise for you." And we were thinking, cupcakes. But she grabbed that piece of paper and she pulled it off that cart. And underneath that piece of paper was a complete set of raw cow lungs. Still steaming from the butcher shop. She said, "I want you guys to see how lungs inflate and deflate." And she reached under that cart and pulled out a spool of about 50 yards of surgical tubing. That's like that clear hose you see in a fish tank. She cut off like a 12-inch straw. She stuck it down into those lungs. She took a deep breath. She said, "Remember, only blow, don't suck." And she got over those lungs and she went, and it was amazing. Those lungs started to inflate. They started to expand. They went, ee, ee. Of course, they didn't really make that noise. If they really made that noise, all cows would go mad. Ee, ee. That's just an illustration. What if you snuck up beside a cow later and you heard it going, ee, ee. And then she gave us each our own piece of tubing. And we each got to try and inflate those lungs. And I was tough, I was mean, I was macho, I was a fourth grader, I bet I was 3 feet tall. I weighed 26 pounds. And I wasn't just going to make those lungs expand. I was going to make those lungs explode. I took my piece of tubing, I stuck it down into those lungs, I took a deep breath, I was like, I was trying to bend so far back, I was off camera, but that's not going to happen. I took that, and those lungs went. That's all I could get him to do. Finally, finally dawned on me that I had the lung capacity of a Dixie cup. So then all the boys, we all got together. We all stuck our tubes down there at once. We were all blowing as hard as we could. There we were, mummies and vampires and werewolves and Wookiees. It was hard to tell the difference between the werewolves and the Wookiees, but we knew who was who. We were all blowing us there. I was just waiting for the principal to come in. What is going on in here? But we never could get those lungs to explode, so we took those lungs and we pushed them behind the lockers with the rest of the detritus from the school year, and we got ready to watch our scary movie. And the movie was The Blob. And The Blob was an old movie when I was in the 4th grade. If you ask your teachers about it later, don't call it a movie. That will confuse them. Call it a picture show. Then they'll know what you're talking about. But what happens in The Blob is a meteorite crashes into Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, cracks in half. Inside there's a blob. It's about the size of a volleyball. Looks like it's made out of red jello. It's going, it can roll half a mile an hour. And yet it is able to chase down healthy adult human beings running as fast as they can. And what happens is the blob gets on you, and when it gets on you, it just consumes you. And the more people it eats, the bigger it gets. And if you were too scared to watch the movie, you could go and sit behind the lockers. But it was dark behind those lockers, and there was a complete set of raw cow lungs behind those lockers. Who knew when the ghost of that cow wasn't going to come looking for those lungs, you know, like, moo. It'd be like, moo, moo. The only person, you people are getting me off track here, the only person too scared to watch the movie, but brave enough to sit behind the lockers, was Alicia Snitch. The rest of us were out there. Pretty soon the blob's as big as a beach ball. And then it's like the size of a Volkswagen. And then it's about half the size of this room. And then they called in the police and the state police, the National Guard, the Army, the Air Force. They're shooting pistols, rifles, rocket launchers, flamethrowers, mortars, helicopters. You understand they weren't actually shooting helicopters at the blob. They were just using those as a platform to launch other weapons. But nothing will stop the blob. And it's this actor named Steve McQueen against a gelatinous alien material. We don't know which one's smarter. And then the blob decides to move on to the other side of town, and the people on the first side of town don't have the decency to pick up the phone and call the people on the other side of town and be like, you guys don't even know what I'm talking about. But anyway, you know, they could have just been like, hey guys on the other side of the town, just thought you might like to know, the blob is coming. But no, they didn't call. So nobody on that side of town knows the blob is coming. They're all sitting in a movie theater watching a movie. So now you got to stay with me, because now we're watching a movie about people watching a movie. It's kind of like looking at this thing right here with these people looking at us. Or you people out there looking, never mind. Anyway, we're watching the movie. And in the back of the movie, you know, the back of the movie where those rectangles are in the projector room, the blob starts oozing out of the projector room, plops down into the balcony, sucks up a couple of people. And then it goes off the balcony into the main part of the theater. Pandemonium breaks out. People are running and screaming. They're going out all the exits at once, but by this time, the blob is so big, it can go out all the exits at once, sucking people back in left and right. It was horrifying, it was terrifying, but I was tough, I was mean, I was macho. There was no way I was going to scream. And then all of a sudden, Wally was sitting next to me, all of a sudden Wally goes, "Ah!" And I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed for him that I had to look. And when I looked, I was like... And when I looked, Wally was pointing. But Wally wasn't pointing at the movie screen. Wally was pointing above the lockers. And above the lockers, in our very own classroom, a great, big, red, hissing, expanding, two-orbed blob was rising up from behind the lockers. It had a long, bloody tentacle running forth from behind it. The blob was in our classroom. I was not macho anymore. I was like, "Mommy!" I was running for the door. I was picking up smaller kids, throwing them at the blob, you know. I was like, eat him, eat her, leave me alone. But the blob beat us to the door. We couldn't get around it. And Mrs. Baird was standing there going, calm down, we'll take care of this. And then we heard a scream. We heard a long, loud, shrill, piercing scream. Please raise your hand if you believe you can do a long, loud, shrill, piercing scream. Yes, ma'am. Do it. Do it. Don't raise your hand if you don't want to do it. Yes, ma'am. It's not bad. Yes, sir, in the yellow. Yes, sir. Yes, in the blue. That was good. Yes, sir. Action. All right. Wait a minute. I got to give these people a try. All right. Is this Hastings here? Does anyone know? This is Spalding. All right. As Spalding, the girl raising her hand with the sweatshirt on. Go ahead. On my left. All right, you kids standing up. Oh. All right, somebody else do it. You know what? All of you do it. All right, stop doing it. All right, Hastings, is that it? Holding, gosh. Wait, no. The other school. The one that's not here and didn't just scream. You guys with the covered wagon thingy. Go. All right, all of you, go. Right. Exactly. Just like that. Shh. From behind the lockers, there was that one long, loud, shrill, piercing scream. We had forgotten about Alicia Snitch. She was back there where the blob had come from. And as we turned to look, we saw Alicia rise up from behind the lockers, entwined in that long, bloody tentacle, her very life force being sucked out of her as the blob grew larger and larger. And Mrs. Baird said, "Don't panic. I'll take care of this." And she grabbed the front of her dress, and she ripped it open. And underneath her dress was that one-piece patriotic bathing suit that Wonder Woman wears. Complete with the calf-high boots and the golden rope, and she got a tiara from somewhere, and she threw it at the blob like a boomerang, and kaboom! The blob exploded, and we were shrouded in a fine red bovine mist. Hunks of lung fell about the classroom. Alicia Snitch dropped with a thump behind the lockers. That long, bloody tentacle lay hissing on the ground. And then we followed Mrs. Baird, nay, we followed Wonder Woman behind the lockers. And Wonder Woman picked up Alicia Snitch and unwound her from that long, bloody tentacle. And we saw where Alicia, in her deep and secret need to know whether or not Mrs. Baird was Wonder Woman, had taken that remaining surgical tubing and had shoved one end deep down into those lungs and had taken the other end and stuck it on that helium tank that that clown had left. And she turned that helium tank up all the way to create that giant lung blob balloon to come and attack our classroom. And then Wonder Woman carried Alicia Snitch and put her in her desk. And then Wonder Woman walked to the back of the classroom, picked up that piece of purple chalk, and made a mark beside Alicia's name. The end. All right, I got time for one more. Quick one. And I'll tell you what it is. Thank you for asking. What? Did you just say a kid's book? Is that what you said? You can go. I know where the principal's office is. I'll take you down there. This book right here, called The King of Little Things. Oh, look at that, by Bill Lepp. Who's that, me? Oh. No, I just published this book in September, and it's really pretty. You should look at it. See? So I'm going to tell you the story, but I'll tell you something. That book is about 750 words long. When you read a book, you look at it and you're like, oh, some author just sat down and typed these words and then printed them out and stuck some glue together. The book. No. 750 words, children. Do you know how long it took me to get that turned into a book? 8 years. 8 years. I know your teachers tell you sometimes, they're like, you need to write a story. And I want you to do a first draft and a second draft and a final draft. And you're like, duh, that's stupid. But 8 years, you know, I don't even know. I can't even count high enough to say how many drafts I had to do. That started out 1,500 words, which is about maybe 2 or 3 pages, single-spaced, regular-sized font. And then the editor's like, you have to cut all this out and cut all this out and cut all this out. And they're like, you have to cut this line. And I'm like, but that's my favorite line. And they're like, learn to kill your babies. That's what they say. It's terrible. But that's what they say in the publishing world. They're like, you got to kill your babies. And so then they'd be like, cut this line out. And then later they'd be like, we really need a line right here. And I'm like, ooh, I know what line we can put right there. And the one that they made me cut out 3 years ago, I'd stick back in there. Oh, that's beautiful. So we cut it in half. Took 8 years. Then some guy drew the pictures. And now it's a book. And I'm going to tell you the story. But the story that I tell you is a little bit different than the book, because I've been telling the story for 8 years since it was a 1,500-word story, not a 750-word story. And if you want to read the story and see what it looks like for real, you can purchase the book today or conveniently on my website. Or you can come to the library on Saturday where I'm going to be, and you can buy it there with your parents and bring other people who want to buy it. But anyway, once there was a king, and he was the king of little things. He was the king of keys, coins, crumbs, condensation. He was the king of needles, noodles, knots, beetles, baby rattles, coins, buttons. He was the king of toy soldiers, little ballerina dolls, pin cushions. He was the king of small kindnesses and pet names. Now, all around the king of little things, there were bigger kings. There were kings of cities, kings of counties, kings of countries, kings of continents. The big kings made their subjects pay for everything, for freedom, for food, for firewood. King of little things gave anything to anyone who asked politely. The big kings had huge castles, had huge parties on Friday and Saturday night. King of little things had a little cabin, would have a few friends over. The big kings all had aspirations. Kings of cities wanted to be kings of counties wanted to be kings of countries wanted to be kings of continents wanted to rule the world. King of little things wanted to remember his wife's birthday. Well, one day, one of the big kings, King Normus, decided it was time to take over the world. So he called together his generals, he called together his advisors, he amassed his army, he set out, he crushed the kings of the cities, he quashed the kings of the counties, he conquered the kings of the countries, he alliterated the kings of the continents, and when he thought he'd taken over the whole world, he had a huge crown made with thousands of tiny jewels, a brand new suit with big brass buttons, he threw a huge party, he stood up in front of everyone, he said, I am now the biggest king that ever was. I am the king of the countries, king of the continents, I'm the king of the sky, I'm the king of the wind, I'm the king of the mountains, I'm the king of the whales, I'm the king of the pachyderms, and he would have gone on like that forever. Except from the back of the room, a servant raised a tremulous hand, and he said, excuse me, my enormous sire, you are indeed the king of the sky, the mountains, the pachyderms. He said, but I'm afraid there's one king whom you have overlooked in your quest to conquer the world. And King Normus said, who, what, which, what king have I overlooked in my quest to conquer the world? And the king of little things said, the servant said, sir, you have overlooked his minuscule majesty, the king of little things. Well, that sent King Normus into a rage. He called together his generals, got together his army, set out to conquer the king of little things. Well, his armies got to the king of little things' cabin in the evening. And this was back in the old days when people were civilized and they waited till morning to attack. And the king of little things was in the kitchen doing the dishes because he knew that it's the little things that matter the most. And as my friend David Holt says, no man has ever been willingly shot in the back while doing the dishes. So he saw the big king's army come in. He knew what was happening. He went out on the front porch. He called together some of his subjects, and he asked respectfully if during the night they would invade the big king's camp. And in the morning, when the big king's army's soldiers woke up, they couldn't attack because chiggers and ticks had crawled underneath their armor. Athlete's foot fungus had crawled down their boots and in between their toes. There were worms in the meat and weevils in the wheat and flies in the fruit, and termites had eaten all the spear shafts and all the arrow shafts, had eaten the axle off the cannon, they'd eaten the catapult. And so King Normus requisitioned new stuff: steel arrows, steel spears, steel axle, steel catapult. And the king of Lothings just shook his head, and he asked his friend Rust to ride his friend Dew into the camp. And sure enough, the next morning when the big king's armies awoke, they couldn't attack. Rust had eaten through their armor. Rust had eaten away the spear shafts, eaten away the arrow shafts. The catapult was now as dangerous as a cantaloupe. And King Normus was in his tent. He was walking back and forth. He was so angry. He said, what am I going to do? How am I going to defeat this king? I can't defeat this king. He controls the little things to create chaos. What can I do? And then he had an idea. He said, I know what I'll do. He said, I'll cheat. He said, I'll lie. Because the king of little things isn't the king of lies. Because a lie, no matter how small, children, is never a little thing. He said, call the king of low things under a flag of truce. Tell him we're going to discuss the situation of the siege. Then we'll capture him. So they sent a soldier. The king of low things came back. He knew it was a trap, but he knew that his subjects would come and help him if he asked. And as soon as the king of little things walked into King Normus's tent, all of the little things in the room recognized their king. The jewels jumped out of King Normus's crown. The fillings jumped out of his teeth. The coins rolled out of the coffers. The buttons jumped off of his suit. His suspenders surrendered. His belt broke, and his pants fell down. So there stood King Normus, trying to hold up both his pants and his pride in front of the king of little things, and he was so upset he said, take him and throw him in a dungeon, throw him in a dungeon. But when they got to the dungeon, once again, all the little things recognized their king, and the nails jumped out of the dungeon doors and bowed down before the king of little things, and the keys refused to open the locks. And King Normus said, put him in a cave. Put him in a cave, put a big rock in front of the cave door. Put him in a cave. And life was not entirely unpleasant in the cave, you know, because the ants brought the king of little things crumbs, and the bees brought him honey, and the birds brought him seeds, and little drops of water made their way down through the mountain and dripped into his mouth. But it was kind of boring, and the king of little things missed his cabin, and he missed his queen. So he asked the ants and the bees and the birds if they would take a message for him. And the ants carried the words like crumbs, and the bees took the words and painted them on the flowers, and the birds dropped the words from the sky like rain, and all over the world, little things began to happen. Strings unstrung, hangers unhung, tables toppled, chairs folded, easels eased away, quilts quivered, quills quit, fires unfroze, boats listed, pickles undilled, hinges squeaked, weights lifted, words twisted, bread broke, ticks and tocks left their clocks. Everything, everywhere, quit working. And everybody knew it was King Normus's fault because he had thrown the king of little things in a cave. So they demanded that the king of little things be set free and that King Normus surrender his crown. Well, King Normus knew he was beaten. So he surrendered his crown, and he loaded some of his enormous possessions into an enormous wagon, including his enormous queen, and off they rode. And the people, she was tall, and the people gave the king of little things the crown. And he asked very little of the people except that they say please and thank you, that they oil hinges regularly, and that they tip generously. And everyone lived adequately ever after, except, of course, King Normus, who could never find his keys or his wallet or his spectacles. And maybe, hopefully, someday even he will learn that it's the little things that matter the most. The end. All right, I just want to show you the picture of King Normus in his underwear because it's funny. Right there. All right, so thanks a lot, guys. You guys have been awesome again. Stay seated. Don't get up. I'll be at the library on Saturday. You guys can come see me there. I'll be telling some different stories. Right now, what I need you to do, and you people at the other schools, look toward a competent, responsible adult person, and they will tell you what to do next. What?
What day will it be when the books are on sale at the library?
Well, I'll be there Saturday, and I will have them with me.
Okay.
So. Thank you, guys.